Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Liz joining you as usual from Central Virginia and the unceded lands of the Monacan Nation. And if you've been listening for a while, you know what I'm going to say next. If you want to know whose native lands you might be residing on, this is especially helpful if you're in North America. Check out native-land.ca. There's a fantastic map there. You can learn whose lands you're residing on. And then that's a great first step, because then you can also start learning, where are those people now? Are they still there? What can you learn from them in their own words? It's just a nice way to deepen your connection with the ancestral people of where you are, and as well as the land itself. So if you're so inclined, check that out. And if you are interested in learning about the sacred feminine in a deeper way, then I would love to encourage you to check out my new online school, Home to Her Academy. My vision for the school is to bring together qualified, really engaging instructors who can teach us about the sacred feminine in ways that are first rooted in the historical record. It's so rich, we might as well turn towards it, but also embodied and intuitive, so inviting us to know with more than our minds, so we get that both and experience. To learn in ways that are intersectional. So it's really addressing the realities of the messy entanglements of spirituality, patriarchy, misogyny, racism, colonialism, all of that. And then ways that are practical. So meaning that we can apply this to our real, ordinary, complicated lives. Because let's be honest, while maybe some of us would like to run away to a remote corner of the forest in our witch's hut and just stay there for years, like we can't do that. So check out hometoheracademy.com to see what's going on and what's coming up. You can sign up for my newsletter while you're there, so you can be notified of classes as they roll out. Be patient with me if you don't see a lot there. That doesn't mean there's not a lot coming and that I'm not working on it behind the scenes really diligently. It just, I'm trying to practice what I preach here too, and letting these things evolve the way they need to. But I can promise you that I have many, many ideas and courses that are in the works that are going to be coming. So I will put that in the show notes. And then one last plug for me and my work. If you'd rather read about the sacred feminine, maybe check out my book, Home to Her, Walking the Transformative Path of the Sacred Feminine. It's all called Home to Her. Easy to keep up with. My book came out late 2022 from Womancraft Publishing. It's a 2023 Nautilus Gold Award recipient. I feel super proud and happy about that. And it's available wherever you buy your books. But if you are thinking about buying it, please do consider buying it from Womancraft. They're an amazing woman-owned business, or order it from your local bookstore. Give your local businesses some love. And if you've read it and you like it, reviews on Amazon and Goodreads in particular are super helpful. I'm so grateful for them. They mean a lot to people, and especially because I chose a heart-based choice with my publisher. It's a small independent publisher. Things like reviews really do go a long way. And the same is true with podcast reviews. If you like this show, please consider leaving it a favorable review. You don't even have to write words. Just give it 5 stars on iTunes. Is super helpful, or anywhere that you're listening to your podcast. And then finally, if you have thoughts for me, please reach out. Social is a really good way to do that. But I love it when I hear from you and you tell me what you think about a particular episode, or you give me your ideas and suggestions. So please keep that coming. And with that, let's get on with the real reason why you are here. So my guest today is, I think, is truly prolific in terms of her output in service to women, to the divine, to fostering understanding of and connection with this thing that I call the sacred feminine. We'll see how she feels about that language. I've known about her work for a while, and I knew that it was going to be just a matter of time before we met and connected, and I am really, really excited to have her with me today. So let me go ahead and introduce her to you now. Kay Louise Aldred is a researcher, writer, and teacher who catalyzes individual, institutional, and collective evolution through education, embodiment, and creativity, amalgamating metacognition, intuition, and instinct. I feel like we can spend the whole episode just unpacking that sentence, and who knows, maybe we will. She facilitates in-person and online live and pre-recorded trauma-informed events and courses alongside providing mentorship. She is also the author of the books Mentorship with Goddess, Growing Sacred Womanhood, Making Love with the Divine, Sacred Ecstatic Erotic Experiences, and Somatic Shamanism, Your Fleshy Knowing and the Tree of Life. These are all published by Girl God Books. Some of you might remember Trista Hendren. Wonderful Trista Hendren was an early guest on this show. And then in addition, Kay and her husband, Dan Aldred, have just published a brand new book called Embodied Education, Creating Safe Space for Learning, Facilitating, and Sharing. I believe also from Girl God. Yes, also from Girl God Books. Okay, awesome. And Kay is joining us today from her home in Northern England. Kay, thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted. That was really lovely introduction and lovely to hear you speak to your own work as well. So really happy to be here sharing the space today. Thank you.
Thank you. I do really want to unpack that sentence. I usually just start with asking people about their spiritual experiences growing up, but I'm gonna mix it up today, and I'm gonna ask you about this. I specifically want to ask about amalgamating metacognition. Oh my God, I can't even speak. Metacognition, intuition, and instinct. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yes, with pleasure, Liz. That is my usual kind of response in podcasts. They go straight to that sentence because it's like, what on earth does that mean? So I'm happy to do that.
I'm not even original. That's a bummer, but
I speak to that because my journey has been really fragmented. So I began trying to understand self, my who I am, and divinity in the mind-based, academically, and through logic. And then I dropped into the body and went to the somatic, the eros route, and searched for it there. And what I have found is that we need both mind, we need metacognition, we need our thinking, our ability to think about our thinking and our thinking processes and bring on our creative mind, alongside intuition and instinct, which are usually an embodied experience. I believe that in society and in education and in our exploration of the divine, we need all aspects of self. So I never leave any part out. I bring on metacognition, the mind, our intuition, our sixth sense, that thing that is beyond mind and body, really, and then instinct, which is in the embedded nature of divinity within the body, our nervous system, our and kind of resolution of trauma, and in that finding divinity. It's like I'm speaking to the whole being, the whole person. And so that's why I amalgamate metacognition, thinking about our thinking, decontaminating our thinking from patriarchal ways and conditioning, intuition, the sixth sense, and then our instinct, our embodiment. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. I love that. It feels very in alignment with what I was saying with the Home to Her Academy too, like wanting to merge these things. And then I have a follow-up question to that, which is, how do you know? How do you know which one? How do you know which one to listen to and which one to follow in a given situation? Which I know every situation is different, but I'm curious how you kind of parse that out in your own life and your own experience.
Beautiful. If in doubt, go to the heart and ask the heart to arbitrate between mind and body, our thought processes and our gut instinct. And so one method that I've actually taken into education, or I'm advocating for, is that we ask children when we're educating them, and adults, what does your mind say? What does your gut and your body say? And then let's finally, if they're at conflict, especially, what does the heart say? Listen to the heart, go into the heart, go into the intuitive, gentle nature. And so when I'm trying to discern which, and if I'm unsure where to go to, I listen to all three parts, but then go to the heart for the final say.
Oh, I love that so much. I wonder, not to put you on the spot, but do you have an example perhaps of when you've sort of worked with a bigger decision or something that you were able to drop in and do that process to guide you?
Yeah, So I'm 50 in December, and I really want to go to Japan. And so I go to the mind and say, you know, do you want to go to Japan? And the mind's like, yes, I can't wait to see the simplicity of how they live, their ethos, you know, the kind of the tea ceremony and how they approach their communion with divinity and spirituality. And then I drop to the body and the body goes, no, the long haul flight, I can't, it's too much. I'm not sure that you would be able to cope with the jet lag or whatever, you know, that kind of, the body's a no. And then I go to the heart and the heart says, yes, we can hold space for that if we tend to what the body needs. So although I probably could have spoken more deeply, that's the one that's coming to mind. And I'm working actually with that now because I do want to do that travel in the next decade.
Well, and I think that's a really good and instructive example too, because that, to me, that brings up this dance of respecting the nervous system and the body, which is real, right? Like, how much can this system and this body hold? Like, we do need to respect that container. And then also recognizing, and I don't know that this is what you're saying, but this is what's coming up for me, is that sometimes whether it's past trauma or past experience or something, there's like something that gets locked in the body that's like, no, that's a little scary to me, you know? And it's sort of work to figure out, am I just pushing myself towards an edge of growth, or is this like a boundary that I need to keep to preserve and protect this container? And there's no easy answers to that, right? Like, it's going to be deeply personal, and it will be situation by situation. Right?
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. And that sensitivity to understanding and how far we can put ourselves in positions of dysregulation or growth. Really, the heart does know. I feel that's been my lived experience anyway.
Yeah. The word longing is coming up to me, and that feels very heart-based. Like, you know, that feeling of like, oh, I'm so drawn to this. Like, I'm touching my heart because I feel like that's where I feel that kind of intuitive wisdom. And typically that longing, I think, is pointing me in the right direction, even if it's scary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's get back on track. Not that we're off track, but this was so helpful. I love that we just went right into it. I would love to hear about some of your spiritual experiences growing up and your background, whether that's religious or otherwise. And, you know, listeners to the show know that I always ask this, and I'm just mostly curious. I love to hear this from people, but I also like to hear, you know, like, what was supportive perhaps of you, and what wasn't. Like, what was worth carrying forward? What told you, I want to go in a different direction? So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes, and do stop me if I kind of go on too long, because I guess in my whole 50 years I've been immersed in the search in spirituality, but also within theology. So my background was from my family background was High Anglican Church, so Church of England, as it's called over here, but high Anglican, so closer to Catholicism than perhaps, you know, your more traditional Protestant based church upbringing. And I lived in a really interesting house where I had a scientist mother she was a doctor of zoology, and she was atheist, I'd say, and a psychologist father who was very much immersed in his own Christian upbringing. And there was a tension within the house of a very rational basis and critique, but also a highly psychological based understanding of Christianity. And I was immersed in that. And I would say that I fell in alignment with the church side, and went to church and was head chorister all the way through, you know, completely confirmed Anglican, did GCSE and A-level RE, then went on and did a degree in theology and kind of traditional biblical theology. Very much seeking, as I said, in the rational, trying to understand the Gospels and look at the different ways of storytelling within the Gospels, all the way through until my graduation, when I considered going into priesthood ordination in the Anglican Church and didn't. I actually went on and trained as an RE teacher and taught in secondary education RE. I'm giving you this background just to show that this theme has run throughout my entire life. Had my children, and then went on and did a master's in theology. And when I did my master's in theology, that was when, because I'd had children, I think that was the portal to break me open into my embodiment and spirituality coming through that birth experience. And it brought up a lot of trauma and questioning of the goodness of human nature and why things happen at a deeper level, because I was in my body, because I'd birthed 3 children.
Yeah.
And so the answers of the scripture and the logic-based religion weren't enough. And so in my master's, that was when I turned to looking at the theology of the erotic, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I was writing about that in 2005, liberation theologies, the theology of well-being, and very much went down that route. And then my life took a different turn, and there was a lot of trauma, and I was divorced, and went back to teaching and carried on teaching. And then I came back to spirituality deeply in 2015, where I actually went into the Anglican priesthood ordination process again, thinking I could take embodiment into that sphere naively. And I always have to share that whilst I was walking the ordination process in the Anglican Church, I was also doing energy and shamanic training simultaneously. And I had to be literally booted out of the Christian church to find, I could not lead that family doctrinal system until they went, "You're not right for us, off you go." And that was my turning point, 2015, where I went, okay, I'm going to have to find my own way here. There's another way. And then came into the books that I've written are really based on my life experience of searching for goddess, the sacred feminine, the feminine of the female body. And yeah, that's where I went. But I couldn't give up the church until they booted me out, literally. I feel like I've dotted around there, Liz, but I'll just pause.
No, that's very helpful. I mean, it's a good timeline. I think it's helpful to get your background there. And there's a little part of me as you're talking that kind of, it breaks my heart a little bit that there isn't space for, or that you didn't experience that there was space in the tradition of your ancestry, like your lineage, for you to be authentically who you are. And and also I relate to that deeply, and I think there have been many guests on the show who have had a similar experience, who maybe would want to bridge it. And that there is, I won't make a blanket statement about Christianity here, because I don't know everything, but it does seem like this is a common experience of wanting to be more expansive and to hold on to some aspects of that tradition, and finding it very difficult to do so.
And speaking to the when I did my master's and did the recovery, I did a research piece called Recovering Mary Magdalene. So this is pre Megan Waterson's work and so on. It's 2005. I was like, oh, the Gnostic Gospels. Oh, the Gospel of the Magdalene. Oh my word! There is this tradition that's just not written within the traditional Christian framework. And then and yes, I mean, I can find real truths within the gospel and within the stories, and I haven't thrown that out at all. It's just the system and the structures do not support the living, breathing divinity of the female form. And so and I was asking that questions in the ordination process. How are we going to engage more girls? How are we going to, allow them to feel the divinity of their, how do we support them in their sexuality? I'm actually asking this. You can imagine the church's response, can't you?
Yeah.
I've taught for 20 years.
Whoa, sex? Whoa, no, la, la, la.
And so, but I'm glad it's almost, I had to really push them to show that, because I was so desperately wanted to belong.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, one thing that I've noticed about your books is that you do weave in scripture. You do weave in references to scripture. I noticed that in your book in particular, Making Love with the Divine, like multiple places. And so I think that's interesting too, when we figure out, because this has happened for me, and I think I've talked about it on the show. I pray a divine feminine version of the rosary every day. I have a very deep relationship to Mary. I mean, she's mother goddess to me. And I don't think I could have gotten here had I stayed within the Christian framework, irony of ironies. So I feel like I have a deeper relationship with Mary, and even to a certain extent, Jesus. I consider him a guide. He's important to me, but it all exists completely outside of that framework of the church.
Same here.
And do also, we're showing, if your listeners, we're showing each other, we're both wearing, I don't know which one yours is. Mine is I don't forget now the name, oh my God, I'm totally drawing a blank. Miraculous. What's it?
Mary. She's
Okay,
a Mary.
Yes, we're both wearing Mary necklaces. The lovely woman sent me this right before or right as the COVID pandemic was starting in earnest. And I've worn it, religiously ever since. Unintended. Yes. Well, so let's talk about the sacred feminine then. And I would love to know, first of all, if you don't like that language, you feel free to use whatever words work for you. But do you feel like she showed up in your life at a particular moment, or was it just sort of a growing awareness, or how did that evolve for you? Yeah. How did that evolve for you?
Yeah. And this changes every time I get asked that, because it's like it's not static at all how I remember or even place her in my life timeline. But as you said that there, I'm thinking the first time the presence was there, it was in incidents of trauma as a child, where aloneness, and it's that blanket of, I suppose, what we would call the Black Madonna energy, the dark feminine. In the darkness is presence, is comfort, is the envelopment of the child that's shaking. She's there, without recognition or naming herself or coming in any form. It was very much a somatic experience for me. And then the next time I guess she really showed up was in 2015, when I had an accident, and I could not have got any more in the depth, I think, of despair than at that moment. And when all else was gone, it's really the Beatles song for me that, Let It Be, is when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me and speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And it's like, let the absolute despair be, the bottom of the pit be bottomless, and I will be the air underneath that holds you as you fall through the chasm of despair. So, and it's so symbolic and pictorial and metaphorical, it's really hard to give a concrete language to. And so for me, she's the net, she's the container, she's beyond sacred feminine. Even for me, she's beyond God, goddess. She is the structure of holding us. That's how I feel she is shown up in my life. The matter of reality is the sacred feminine. It's a bit esoteric. Sorry, forgive me, Liz, if I went a bit off piece there.
No, that resonates for me. I had two images that came to mind as you said that, and one is a net, or like spider web, like just the weaving the world together, and the other is, and this is how I often think of her and actually call her in every day, and I put the name of Mary on her, I think, because my limited human mind cannot comprehend something that is so large. But I call her in as the cosmic void. And to me, the void is it's not absence of anything. It's the presence of everything. It's the dark matter of sorts that's holding all of it, which I feel like is kind of like what you're saying. Yes?
Yes, agree.
Right? Yeah,
agree.
Yeah. Oh, I want to talk about some of your books that you've written because they're lovely. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about them is they take you on a journey, and you really see your commitment to education and experiential learning coming through, because you're not just sitting down and reading, and I say even in my own book, I do include some reflection questions at the end of each chapter, but when I wrote, the goal was like, here, let me give you all this information, like I know all these things and I want to share it with you so badly. Let me give this all to you. And what I love about your books is that it really feels like an invitation to like journey with these points of insight or lessons that you're sharing so that you make it your own. I think that's really lovely. And I'm guessing maybe you could talk a little bit to that, like what your goal is with your writing, because it does feel like it's very education and transformation oriented.
I'm delighted that you felt that, because my biggest fear is that anybody feels anything's done to them or told to them as an educationalist. I do see myself as sharing information and for people to make it their own. So thank you for that reflection. And it also echoes my long-term aim, which is really to speak to how we educate spiritually in society, look at new structures that we can do that through and in, but more specifically, critiquing the RE curriculum. I was trained as an RE teacher.
And what does RE stand for?
Religious education.
Religious education, yeah, thank you, okay.
11 to 18. And but I also have done work in primary, which is the younger ones. And I feel that really, I think we need to critique and look at what we're educating children around in terms of spirituality and religion. Not saying throw anything out, but I think that we're missing supporting them in their spiritual well-being. So I guess my books are me producing curriculums that we could experiment with, and can we somehow bring those into education, or at least critique the current education system so that we can bring more, yes, goddess spirituality, of course, we need nature-based spirituality, we need embodiment spirituality, and finding for me, spirituality means finding meaning in your day-to-day life and communing with something that is beyond self. Whatever that is up to you. And so the books are very much, hey, come and try this out. If it doesn't work, don't worry. Try this. And so, yeah, that's really my long-term aim between now and 70. I've got 20 years.
Oh, you've got tons of time. I mean, you're kind of prolific here. Like I said that in the intro, so I have full faith in all that you can accomplish in the next 20 years. I think you're just fine. Well, and I loved, I love the invitation to reflect and all of that, and to make that spiritual journey personal, right? Which is, of course, as it should be, of course. Well, and also, I really loved your book. I love them all, but I really loved your book, Making Love with the Divine. And in that, you wrote that you were passionate about tangible divinity. And you said, I write and teach about the fusion of the mundane and sacred and the holiness of flesh. And I loved that so much that I underlined it. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about this idea of what tangible divinity means to you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't think I would be alone in not being satisfied with divinity being a concept that is in the mind.
Yeah.
I certainly don't think it's only women who are seeking for that. I think we're all longing, like what you said, that desiring to feel fully alive, fully like expansive. And for me, tangible divinity is being able to be in joy and connectedness with yourself fully, and the environment you're in, and the light that's behind me here, and the beauty of that I could play with if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm. I know. So you'll have to look at the video, listeners, to see it. It is quite lovely.
That's like, wow, what, for me, that is quite a divine, like a divine experience, because it's something beyond self that I'm curious about. and then connected with my land that you said at the beginning, and really connecting into earth and serving the space that I'm in, my community, and then connecting with something bigger, a bigger purpose, making meaning of my life. And that all happens in and through the body. So for me, tangible divinity is going in and through our full embodiment, our senses, our obviously our minds as well, and our heart. And so it's not enough for me for divinity to just be a concept. I have to, like the Doubting Thomas, I have to feel and see and touch it in order for it to be fully real for me. Does that answer it?
Yes, it does. And so in that book, you tell me if this sounds right to you, but the way I experience that book, Making Love with the Divine, is all about ways in which you can literally touch the divine, right? Like have that interaction. Does that feel right to you? Yeah.
Yes. And it was based on, I invited in reflections from people. I had it was a global audience that connected in. There was a set of questions, and then some people offer Zoom longer form interviews with me where they shared their experience of divinity. And from making the divine cup of coffee, don't like cup of coffee, but that share was phenomenal, you know, and the sensuousness and the eroticism of that ritual that woman had embedded in her day-to-day life was divine for her. To people's pets, or cold swimming in water, or a piece of music, or touching a newborn, or hanging out washing, you know, and the sense of that linen, and the orgasmic experience of that, which was not sexual in and of itself, but it was expensive. This is all divine in the mundane, and so for me, that's tangible divinity.
Yes, I mean, some of what you're saying too is making me think of Tantra, you know, like Tantric school of thought, right? Of that, yes, like just finding the ecstasy and like a union in our everyday experiences. So powerful. And I want to hear you talk more about some of those ways in which you write about, you know, like how we can make love with the divine. But I also am curious if you could speak to, in your experience, either through those interviews, I don't know if you got into it with the interviews, but even just in your own life, like what are the things that you feel like slow us down? I was going to say block us from those ecstatic experiences, but limit us from feeling it and recognizing it. And how do you think we work with that to make sure we are really having those experiences or recognizing them when they're happening?
Yeah. Let me just think for a second where to go with this one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of education, particularly anything that closes down our joy or makes judgment on our joy. If the joy that we're experiencing, or the young person, let's say, is experiencing, is not hurting anyone, okay, right? We don't want joy to be abusive to other people, but it's not hurting them, moving or splashing in a puddle, let's say. The child that's splashing in the puddle is making up with the divine. They're in their pure joy and communing with the element of water, and the laughter that comes through, that guttural sound that comes through, that is in the mundane, and it's closed down and controlled by firstly education. I think I'm not going down the line of parents, because I know I will have done that with my own children because I was rushing around. We're doing the best we can, but if we look at education, it is really, we're shut down and controlled and battered down in our embodiment to just mind. And once we go just to mind and judgment and logic, and what's the purpose of that anyway, exploring that thought, then we are cutting off. That's what limits our communion with divinity on a day-to-day basis, and it suits controlling systems to batter down the embodiment. So that's the agenda, and I think that's what cuts us off. Having very little time to daydream and be in our flow states and silliness and just doing for the sake of doing, rather than for productivity. Oh my word, it's such a big thing. But also because often with little children, if we see them in their joy and their communion with the divine, we close them down because it's too painful for us to see it as adults.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit big.
No, and I apologize to listeners if I can't always remember what I've mentioned on the show versus what I've mentioned to other people. So if I've already told this story, you're welcome to fast forward. But what came to mind when you were talking is this experience that I had, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I had come back I went to Hawaii on a yoga retreat, and it was really informative. Like one of the things we did was, it's called laughter yoga, and there's an element of silliness to it, and there's an element of just like allowing yourself to, just to bring in some joy and playfulness. And I was noticing that it was really fun, and that also that it was somewhat challenging for me and maybe for some of the other people to participate in that experience fully. And then I was holding that and thinking about that, and I came back and I was volunteering at my daughter's school. I think she was in kindergarten at the time, first grade, I'm not sure, but I was volunteering in the library, and the kids were there doing story time. And then after the story time, I'm pretty sure they were in kindergarten, they all come out, and the teacher is like, and I loved the teacher, she's a lovely person, but very focused on getting these kids to walk in a line. And kids don't want to walk in a line. They want to walk goofy. They want to like stop and stare at the bird, or like the whatever they're seeing. They just listened to a story that made them happy. Like they want to giggle. They want to bump into their friends. And it really struck me how early we start indoctrinating, and that's the word, right? Indoctrinating our children to give up their joy and literally fall in line. And of course, you don't want kids running into the parking lot, or like, you got an agenda, like you've got it. But what would happen if you just let them, if you were like, okay, we all got to be back in the classroom in the next 5 minutes. I need my eyes on you, but you get there how you want, and what would happen? Because what really hit me too in that experience was how hard it was for us as adults, and how we're working so hard to reclaim this. And God knows not everybody can fly to Hawaii and do a yoga retreat, and we really have to work to bring that sense of joy and give ourselves permission to do it. And then here we are teaching our kids so early to lock down the very thing that we're trying so hard to reclaim later on in life. It was profound to me.
Agree.
Yeah.
And it is about, and this is why I'm trauma informed and nervous system aware, because joy, the expansion of joy, can feel even more of a threat really than attack sometimes. To actually go into and be seen in that goofy joy, that full joy, that like eye-open expansiveness can feel threatening, because how many times have we had a wagging finger telling us off to close it down? And so when I've worked with my nervous system, the joy piece has only really been in the last 2 years, that since I've written actually, that I've really started to open to the full expansion of my capacity to make love with the divine through joy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that really, that feels profound what you just said, that going into the joy can feel scarier than some of the other things. I think that's really true. And I'm curious, in all of your theology work, and I know there's not one answer, so we'll just go ahead and put that out there. But in all of your theology work, I want to know what the origins are of shutting this down, and the purpose of it. I mean, besides power, which seems so obvious and limiting, but I don't know. Do you have any perspective on that?
I think it's a woman in her true joy. If we think of women that we've seen move in their joy, so loose hips, and their limbs are supple, and they're guttural in their laughter, and they're big in their appetites, all aspects, is an incredible threat to the system of religion and theology, because she will speak back in truth to her embodied connection to the divine, to the scripture that can't touch that. So for me, the theological origin is the blame kind of the shutting down of women's appetite in all aspects, and movement, and bringing pain to the body rather than joy and pleasure. That to me is the origin. And of course we go back to Genesis, don't we?
Yes.
You'll suffer in childbirth. So it was the Bible's very well crafted to shame and to shut down women's embodied experience. It's crafted to do that for a reason, to control.
Yes. So a couple of things came up as you said that. I was thinking about, I've recently gotten, I did it for a while and then took a break, and I'm really committed to it now, my dance practice. So I do 5 rhythms dance, which I'll put a link if anybody doesn't know what that is, you know, so you can learn about it. I wish Gabrielle Roth were still alive. I'd love to have her on the podcast. But that practice is so powerful for me. And I was sensing that and feeling that as you were talking about a woman in her full joy, and how I've seen that, how I will often walk onto the dance floor and still do the judgy, kind of patriarchal judgy thing of like, look at us, we're a bunch of misfits or whatever. And then by the end of the dance, I'm like, everybody here is so freaking beautiful. Like, I can't even stand it. Like, it's just stunning how beautiful these ordinary human beings are. But what I was thinking about with that expansiveness too, is that for me, and I'd be curious, maybe this takes us back to the idea of making love with the divine. The sexual and the spiritual are deeply intertwined, because that's like life force energy that's moving up. And I was literally seeing, and it's not just in a gendered way, but this is how I'm seeing it, men turning away from the church and towards this beautiful body expansion. And it's not just about sex, but it's also about sex, because that is like this joyful, ecstatic experience that you can have. That is, I don't know, I'm just going to say, for me, is way more meaningful than reading a book in a church, sitting in a pew.
Exactly. And more mystical.
Yeah.
And more connective. Yeah. And I also say too, there's a woman in her joy and in her true connectiveness with the divine can't be sold to. So she breaks down the capitalist structures. It's free. The book, that's what the point I make in the Making Love book over and over again is it's free. Don't be sold to. Yeah, you can access this in and through your body in the mundane day to day. And it might not be movement. It could be a really beautiful, intimate relationship with your partner. It can be in you know, wild water swimming. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's free. And so it's anti-capitalist as well, and non-consumerist. We can't be sold to. We're out of the structures of being controlled. It's radical, and that's what they knew.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and can you give some more examples, like some of the categories that you explore in that book of Making Love with the Divine? I know you've kind of spoken to a few examples here and there, but can you maybe just weave a little bit more around that to help it bring to life for people?
Yeah, sure. So I talk about music, and you exploring which vibration of music really hits you at a cellular level and a goose pimply level. Movement is one, and for some people it's the rhythm of running, just that, yes. Or walking, being in nature, food, nurturing, obviously children is what parenting is one aspect of it, and then we have self-pleasure, which is separate to intimate relationship, sex. Although that's just a small part of the book, I just want to say, because people thought it was going to be, it's a tiny part of the book. And then for me, the biggest one is writing, free flow writing. I think I start with "Words burn me," which is that Sappho quote, I think it is. Yeah. And they really do. I have to moderate how I allow words to come through me, because I can just write and write and write, and that's not always good for my body. But really allowing the truth of you to come through your voice or the pen or the typing is a deeply intimate relationship with the divine. Have I missed anything that you can think of there?
Well, I remember that you broke out to like the creative process, like there's writing and also just creation in general, which can include writing, right? But just giving yourself permission, whether that's knitting or painting or whatever, like that creative process as well. Because I know that's one that I had totally cut off. And when I got back on the Sacred Feminine path, I got much more interested in like what I can make. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, I also say, I think in it, I can't I can draw, but I can't really. I don't feel like I create any beauty out of that. But I can make, that's why altars and ritual are so important to women's spirituality, because we make beauty in mandalas on the earth with the items that we collect. And children do this naturally. They go out and they get an acorn and they get a few leaves and they make pretty patterns. We're making love with the divine. We're allowing our creative expression in the 3D objects rather than just how we're taught, shut down at school, that we have to paint a certain way. So it's really allowing permission for you to explore that in your own way.
Yes. Food came up for me too, right? There's alchemy in food, there's creation in food. Like that's another one that I think of as like, can be really beautiful too.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure I hold some space for you to talk about some of your, you've written a lot of books. So I want to talk about, the focus and the emphasis on your other books as well. And I definitely want to make sure we talk about your most recent one, Embodied Education. But maybe you could tell me a little bit about, and I want to say, just for anyone who's listening, Somatic Shamanism, I know, and Kay, I don't know if you've encountered like the challenges around this word shamanic. So I don't know if you want to speak to that or not. I am aware that that is a word that is specifically refers to indigenous wisdom tradition from Siberia, I believe. I'm aware that it's kind of a colonized term to put on indigenous wisdom across a lot of different cultures. And I'm not also aware of a word that we figured out to replace it yet, because it seems to me, and I would love to hear you talk about this, Kay. It seems to me, though, there is a through line between a lot of these indigenous traditions that have survived outside of colonialism. And I feel that that is what I'm trying to name when I still use that word. I don't know about you, but I would just love to hear you talk about what, that whole focus of that book as well.
Sure. So somatic shamanism, I was aware that word was potentially disruptive. And I do speak to that within the book. I talk about how, as you said, all cultures who existed outside colonialism have maintained a wisdom tradition, which is earth-based, based in reciprocity and respect to the earth, to Mother Earth, and to the land. And certainly for me, as a Celtic shamanism is named over here in England. It's not, they don't feel it's appropriated at all, and it is indigenous to the lands of England, and so I'm very much rooted in that. And I come at it from within the book that our bodies are the tree of life, the connectivity of earth and above and below, whatever you want to name them as. And really, the more we can get in touch with our bodies and our relationship with the land and our local community, and reclaim that organic, decolonialized and capitalist spirituality, and we teach that to children, whatever we name it, and shamanism might not be the word we use, that for me, I think, is the missing piece that will really help with safeguarding the earth, human connection, and our well-being. So I hear everything, the critique, and I do speak more deeply within the book to it, and the book does not template any specific tradition. It allows you to create your own wheel, as most cultures do, and find your own guides and your own wisdom in relation to the land on which you live, or your ancestral land. I don't know if that speaks enough to that, Liz.
Yeah, it does. And I was just going to say for myself, as my own experience, and again, what I call the sacred feminine is what really kicked the door open to all of this for me. So, but a lot of that has evolved organically and intuitively. So there are things that I do that I didn't know until I learned later that, oh, there's a tradition of doing this, or I have a practice of connecting my energy to a world tree that I've been doing for a while now, or, honoring the 4 directions, things like that. There were things that kind of emerged organically from my own spiritual practice and sitting on the land that just seemed like they wanted to come. And so I'm, be curious about that for other people as well. I do think there's some rooted innate human wisdom about these things that transcends our understanding and even our current ability to dialogue about them. And so it's an interesting practice, which I think your book is inviting people to do, is to start to journey into that wisdom of the body and that lineage of humanity, to connect to that.
And the tree is a motif within all wisdom traditions and religions, even the tree of life, and even Darwin wrote about it. So, and if we think about how we say our ancestry is often done as a tree as well. Yeah. So it's like a motif. It is a symbol that is universal, and how we find different language to name that. I haven't got the full answer to that, but I hear, you know, all sides, what everybody says about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything, because I don't want to skip past it, I'm also like aware of our time, and I want to make sure we talk about mentorship with Goddess, and I want to make sure we talk about embodied education, but is there anything else you'd want to say around this idea of your fleshy knowing? I feel like we've kind of talked about that somewhat already, but
yeah, I think currently for women particularly, I've worked with women and girls my whole career. So, you know, I was head of year when I was a teacher as well. So I worked pastorally with predominantly 16 to 18. That was the age range that I worked pastorally with. Women and girls are taught very young not to trust themselves. And they're certainly taught not to trust their body, their instinct and their intuition. And so for me, I'm fully committed to embedding spirituality in the body and the body's knowing and the body's wisdom, rather than it externally being told by a guru or a teacher or a book. So again, the workbooks they are workbooks, aren't they? They're kind of like curriculums to try out, are really about what works for you. And Mentorship with Goddess, if I just move to that, was the first book I wrote based on my own perimenopause journey. And I feel it's a rite of passage curriculum that can go 13 to 28, that first chance we have at individuation and becoming embedded in our own kind of authority and autonomy as women that we often miss. And then 37 to 58, let's say, that second adolescence, perimenopause, where we also become our truth again. And so Mentorship with Goddess is really connecting to the sacredness of the female form and her authority and her sovereignty and her spiritual authority, and exploring that. But it's a holistic well-being curriculum. So it comes with the body, there's a bit of coaching with the mind, and there's a wellness piece about understanding your body and your nervous system. And so I'd like to, and I have tried to deliver this to teenage girls, and they really enjoy it. They do enjoy it's an alternative way of coming at health education as well as spiritual well-being. So that's really what I mean by fleshy knowing, remembering that women, as well as, you know, we've heard the male voice, we've heard the male leadership in religion and spiritual spaces, and now it's time. What is a woman's experience of spiritual authority, and what is that? And so I'm very much interested in supporting that becoming the norm actually in society, that women have a spiritual authority.
I love that. Well, and I'm curious too, as we're talking specifically about women, and I know that you can't speak for your partner, but you have also just written a book with him, right, called Embodied Education. And I wonder, in your exploration of that, I want to hear about that book too, but you know, what's your understanding or perspective on the embodied piece for the male-bodied individuals in our lives?
Sure. And I have 2 sons as well as a daughter. So so I do understand that. And what I love about nervous system education is that bodies are bodies are bodies, and we all have a nervous system that operates in a similar way, although our stress and survival responses can be different according to gender and conditioning. But for me, the embodiment piece is as important for men as it is for women, and boys as it is for girls, in different ways. And I cannot speak to the male experience, but I can know that when my husband has come on this journey with me and really started to regulate his nervous system, he sees the benefit of embodied ways of knowing and can go into his body to get other information and that is beyond the strength of his mind, which is really strong. So he sees and has experienced the benefit of it and believes that we need that for boys in education as much as we need it for girls. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. And it's, I have a son too. And so I'm kind of, there's just, my head was spinning a little bit about that. I think my kids are still kind of coming into their bodies fully and their understanding of self. They're still young. So, but yeah, that's interesting. Is there any more you want to say about this book that you wrote together, Embodied Education, Creating Safe Spaces for Learning, Facilitating, and Sharing? I would just love to hear I was going to call it a pitch, but I know you're not pitching us anything here, but
no.
you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. This is a piece where it's a visionary document. I'm going to be honest. Mm-hmm. It is very visionary, and it's about let's open the door to start to imagine how education could be. Mm-hmm. And this is, we define education as anywhere where someone is sharing knowledge with someone else. So it covers a wide range of forums, including schools. And so the current education system here in the UK, now let me find the right word for this, is not meeting the needs of even the majority anymore, okay? And particularly post-COVID. We've seen an increase in children who are choosing and don't want to go to school, and an increase in parents that are homeschooling children. Yeah. And so it's just not working. So we're opening the door. That's how we describe this book, to let's imagine if we bring the body into education alongside the mind, because we need both. But there's no learning really without parasympathetic ventral vagal nervous system. Until we get ourselves into the green zone of curiosity and connectedness, we're not going to be able to access critical thinking, higher ordered thinking, and creative thinking. So therefore, what are we doing? If we're educating children in a system where their bodies feel unsafe, they can't use the toilet when they want to, they can't hydrate, they're too hot, they're in scratchy uniforms. This is just some of the stuff we talk about. Yeah. And we facilitated views for this, and that was people's experience, school trauma. What are we doing? How is education happening? So I know we're about probably 2 decades ahead of it, where anywhere, the kind of collective can really think. And I don't think we're special because we're doing that. But if we can affect some questions and some discussion around this, that's the purpose of this document, this book.
I really love that. And it takes, and I want to say this just to reflect back to you, because I hear you saying that as well, but, in a non-capitalist, non-hierarchical way, but it takes the forerunners, it takes the person who's willing to put it down on paper and be like, hey, I learned about this in grad school around social movements. Like, they called it the French, right? Like those people over here were talking about something that feels really radical and different really early on. But then later, those ideas tend to work their way after people are initially resistant, perhaps, or whatever, like they work their way into the mainstream. So I feel like that's a nice tee up to for this last question that I wanted to ask you, which was, how do you relate and understand your work to the context of the current world that we're living in terms of like, we can't even say climate change anymore, like climate collapse, I feel like we're late stage capitalism, all of this. How do you see and relate your work to that? And maybe a related kind of follow-up question is, I don't want to ask if you have hope, but maybe it is, like what your hope is that this work might be contributing to for the future, for your children and future descendants.
I guess if I was to summarize, we as humans have operated for too long just in the mind space. And so coming into the body, dropping into the body, and I'm just going to credit my mentor, Irene Lyon, who's a nervous system specialist who I have done all my education with. You know, all nervous system education I have, she's credited, and all of my workbooks are due to her courses and her education. Dropping into the nervous system, the future of the planet and of the goodness that is possible within humanity can be found within a regulated nervous system and us reconnecting with our bodies. And so that is the focus of my work. That is the drive, and that is my hope. Pathologizing the body and emotions and spirituality hasn't worked. Look at the state of the world and the amount of people who are taking medication. And so we are coming to a brick wall where we're going to have to look at the body in a different way. And my small part of that is looking at the body within education and within spirituality and religion. And so that's my hope. My hope is that we all are able to start to feel and tend to our bodies, and we will automatically tend to the earth when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that's the answer.
Yeah, it really does. And that answer to me also takes me out of a place of like, I feel like there's a lot of dialogue around, are we going to save the planet or not? Which, of course, the planet's going to be here. We're talking about the wrong thing, right? She's saving herself right now by injecting us. Like, she's fine. But what we're really saying is saving humanity. But I think what your answer just made me feel into, and there's a strange, while it might not seem like it would be comforting, there's a strange comfort to it, is that it's not about who survives and who doesn't, but how we live, how we actually live. Yeah, and there's something that comes over me that feels very soothing just thinking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just what you said about climate and the earth, like I look and go, why we are at her, and mercy's the wrong word. We like, why on earth do we think that we're going to destroy her? Like, literally, she will create equilibrium and balance. That is the shamanic principle.
Yeah.
I need balance, reciprocity. If we're not giving reciprocity, at one point it will just tip. Yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like, there's a great comfort within the surrender of coming back to the body and the earth, and that the balance will restore that way. Yeah. And I bring that lens to spirituality and education.
I love it. Well, I love all that you're doing. Such a joy to be in conversation with you. My heart feels very full. So thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom, and thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It's so meaningful and really powerful. So I have much gratitude to you.
And to you, thank you for having me, and thank you for all of your work, Liz, too. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for listening. Just going to throw you in this big love fest. I'm so glad that you're here and that you want to listen. You can, if you like the show, you can leave it a favorable review. You can tell all your friends about it. You can subscribe. You can do all those things. Reach out to me if you've got thoughts, as always, on social media. I'll put that in the show notes, how you can do that. And until next time, please take very good care of yourself and this beautiful body that you get to inhabit. And I'll talk to you again soon.